Samyukta, a journal of women's studies, is a biannual of women's initiatives, a group of women professionals based at Thiruvananthapuram. It was founded as a response to the need many of us felt of having a medium through which women can share their experiences, views, and opinions. By providing a forum for dialogue, we hope to explore the many ways in which women can negotiate the subaltern status they presently occupy. It is our wish that Samyukta will emerge as a powerful instrument in instilling the spirit of self awareness in women. Samyukta, where did it all begin, ma'am?
Well, I joined the Institute of English in the year 1990. And in 1991, the women faculty members at the university, we formed an association which is called the Kerala University Women's Forum. And I think it was a kind of a discussion forum basically, where we used to gather and talk about people from different disciplines, even the science departments, botany, physics, and all of us would kind of gather together and have talks. If I remember correct, in 96 or 97, I volunteered because, as I told you, it was an old dream of mine to edit something. It need not be a book, it not be a journal, but I wanted to be an editor. And I volunteered to edit a newsletter for the Kerala University Women's Forum, which is the name of that organization, which had brought out a 12-page newsletter at the beginning. Come 1998 or 99, I'm not exactly sure of the year, then there was some differences of opinion within the Kerala University Women's Forum, and fortunately or unfortunately, I was forced to come out of that. I say fortunately because if I had not come out of the Women's Forum, I would have continued there. But since I was forced to come out of that, then I said, well, I'm going to do something and I'll bring out a journal. Even in the first number of the KUWF newsletter, I had written very clearly that I was hoping that this will mature into a publication, a journal of women's studies, because see, at that point of time, we did not have too many publications from India, and particularly that holds true even now for women to come out and express their views.
When this Samyukta was started, uh, I think even Jayashree or GS Jayashree was not very sure about the second issue when it is going to come out, and all sorts of people, kept on reminding them that they are looking forward to the next issue. And Jayashree was very confident that we should bring it out in time. And initially, Samyukta was called a journal of women's studies. This is the very first women's studies journal coming out from South India. And I think all of us were very excited about it.
Because if you look at the journals, most of them are edited by men. And if you look at the perspectives which are there, again, I would say they are rather male centered. So, to give space to women and to give voice to women, I felt that we must have a publication. And that is exactly how we started on this whole idea of, so it matured from the KUWF newsletter to the Journal of Women's Studies, which Samyukta has now come to be, and we are completing 25 years next year.
The initial years of the journal had focused on issues such as access to education for women and the role of women in the development of the curriculum. The articles were more about giving the reader an exposition or general introduction of what women's studies are and discuss various ideas pertaining to it. Later, it makes a point that educating is not enough unless they make themselves meaningful and climb up the ladder.
For example, the politics of caste imbricates the politics of gender. The mood of the journals in the following issue starts to explore the working class and tries to reimagine the society from its crust. The scope or purview of the journals became wider, with issues such as caste and identity being brought to the front. Fictional pieces like Sleepless Nights in Wayanad, Pandi Bojanam, or love songs in Atharva Veda did try to brazenly recreate the reality.
There is absolutely no doubt about the fact that caste and gender are intertwined. The very obvious way you can say that in terms of caste and in terms of gender, people are marginalized. That's the obvious one. But then there's a kind of a double marginalized marginalization which happens when you belong to a certain caste and then you are the female of the gender, or then you are a transgender, or you're one of these multiple sexual orientations that people do have. So the kind of marginalization becomes much broader and heavier and more difficult to overcome when there is an intersection of both these together. That's one aspect of it.
Translations have been there in Samyukta right from the very first issue. And you will find that there are not just translations from Malayalam language, there are translations from most of the other Indian regional languages. Also, almost all genres of literature like prose, poetry, drama, everything is represented there. So it's definitely a celebration of literature. But I'd say that the selection of the pieces, that's a political act. It's very deliberate. You will find that the literary pieces that have been published in Samyukta, they include the autobiographies of not very significant people. There are oral narratives. There are also, historical documents, memoirs, letters, diaries. So that's a very clear and clever political act, I would say.
You possess a man's brain, but a brain is not enough. To run the show, you need a man behind you. It's all very well to talk about equality. It takes a man to do things which need brawn. You know what I'm driving at? The issues in the following time period are testaments to the flexible and accommodating nature of Samyukta. Some volumes are even exclusive anthologies of fictional pieces, intended to promote women's writing and help them bring out their unique voices as well. Moreover, there was an increased interest in research about film as an academic discipline, and more numbers of articles started to deal with films and film studies.
See, all the editors of Samyukta are teachers, and they know very well that there are more than one way to drive home a point. So, there are always critical articles, research articles there in Samyukta. We know very well that you can establish a fact using facts and figures, statistical data. It will give you a very clear idea of what is going on, and it will have a great impression on you. But then at the same time, with a story on the same topic, you can have more of an emotional impact.
I feel that the division between the creative and the critical is very, very artificial. If the very best of creative writing is critical by nature, is my opinion. You take a creative work by, say, Shakespeare. Can you find better criticism of society or even aesthetic positions than what you find in Shakespeare? So when we started publishing the journal, I felt that this has got a gender angle too, the creative and the critical, right? Because it's almost always felt that women are creative but men are critical. How is that so? Can't women be critical? Right. Huh? So we thought we'll break down the schism between the creative and the critical from the first instance. That's one thing. So we did include a lot of material which perhaps cannot be categorized as either creative or critical. That's one thing.
After long deliberations on feminist movements, on feminist techniques of writing, you have one full volume of creative feminist stories. And then again, there is this issue edited by Margaret Badran on Islamic feminism. It is followed by another issue that is edited by Varsha Bashir on women writing from the Islamic world. So this is considered as a kind of reinforcement of what has been done before. This is another way of looking at the same reality, reinforcing another facet through another medium, which makes the perception perhaps richer.
Cinema, film, movie, whichever term we use, despite the differences underlying them, identifies a medium which for a considerable time was kept at a safe distance from academia. as an audio visual text or as a system of representation signifying meanings, cinema was considered a form of entertainment and nothing more. Further, with the assigned hierarchy that we attribute to literature and cinema's vaudeville origins, it was indeed a struggle for cinema to gain a respectable positioning. So, even when cinema was brought into the universities post 1950s, there was a pertinent dilemma behind all this, and that was the dividing line between the entertainment and specialized knowledge. So you can imagine what would have been the scenario and the amount of time that has gone into getting academic journals to publish articles related to cinema. Samyukta Journal also opened its portals for articles related to cinema in the 21st century, to be precise, in the latter part of 2008.
One of the things that we noticed, that is a critical kind of understanding that we gain when we are going through these writings of women, was that a kind of a self-censorship that women used to impose on themselves. You might want to write something, then you don't want to write it because you feel it will go against a family position or pride or whatever. You may write it, but still you may not want to publish it. You don't want to be heard, and all this, no one is putting these kinds of controls on women, self-imposed censorship. And we felt that if we are able to give a kind of a platform for women to come out of this and say that there is nothing wrong in coming out with what you feel and what you want to say, and here is a medium for you, and please do it, make use of it, right?
From health to sexuality, from caste to development, the following journals of Samyukta did go back and touch upon some of the issues that have been said in early editions. This came from a clear understanding of the volatility of social issues that change according to the weather of the society. These going backs help to look at the same issue with an updated lens and also to keep check of the progress and fill in the rifts, if any.
Well, it is not a fortunate accident, and it is not something that is planned earlier also. It was kind of an organic progression as we went forward.
I would say that a shift was inevitable because earlier we began with the basics, as you might say. We were looking at even entitlement, women's entitlement, and what kind of, a very basic kind of approach, their various relationship with health, like how they managed health by themselves, and what kind of roles that, what does health mean actually as far as a woman is concerned.
The main concerns of Samyukta Journal have always been the same. It has remained the same throughout. But then, it's almost 22 years since the journal got published. So we can't sit complacent saying that we have dealt with this issue in the earlier period. So what we usually do is we revisit, as you said, we revisit the same topic because it needs to be revisited and it needs to be rethought.
Basically, we had a kind of a cover article, an introductory article, which took into consideration all these various things, all the various facets of women's preoccupation with health, or rather women's involvement in health issues, basically engendering health. That was what we called that particular article.
By the passage of the time, you cannot always say that some progress has been made. Sometimes it's not progress, sometimes things go backward. So, what we do that is that we want to document the issue, place it in context, in the present, to deal with what all has happened, to understand the present, and if possible, to deal with the same issue in the future in a better way. As you said, it is just like retellings, but then it is different also, in the sense that our aim is not just to subvert what exists, it is to document, to understand, and to address perhaps in a better way.
So, if you go through the numbers, we find that it's a kind of an intellectual journey, and in a certain way, it reflects the changes that were happening in the country also. See, 25 years is not a small period of time. So, what is going on in the country in the 25 years can perhaps be read through the work that we had published in Samyukta, the changes in perspective and the academic take on that. That is it.
The speeding mind overtakes past events and races past the vehicle, a journey of many years for me and for the road. In the following issues, religion and myths emerged as a backdrop to understand the historical image of gender in the society. The byline of the journal was also changed from Journal of Women's Studies to Journal of Gender and Culture to facilitate broader and inclusive understanding of both identity and society. Furthermore, the journal also went online in 2016, which helped with the democratic and unhindered accessibility to readers across the globe. Even the online space of Samyukta continues to carry the ever experimentative legacy, which now includes exclusive sections for fiction, poetry, and theory circle as well.
And we were talking about the change that we would be able to bring into the contents of the journal if we change from women's studies to gender studies, where it would broaden the very scope of the idea of gender, inclusive, the idea of inclusiveness that I was telling you about. So we can bring in masculinity studies, we can bring in transgender studies, the very idea of gender as a condition rather than as a construct. So to me, it's a basic difference between something which is conditioned and is broad and which is fluid, which can take, and which is a very, very accommodative in that very sense of the term. And I think it was in the year 2014 or 15 when there was a general consensus, because that's the way decisions are taken in Samyukta. So a lot of arguments which are there, and people did want to stick to women's studies for a long, I mean, at least many of them wanted to do that. But finally, everyone agreed that we should be able to. So it is not a fad; it's not something that came all of a sudden. That we should be moving with the times. We here decided was that we will keep aside women's studies and move to not just gender, but we'll club gender with culture. So it's a journal of gender and culture. Along with that, we kind of stopped printing the journal. Actually, 1 year after that, and made it digital totally. That also helped us in a certain way because it ensured reach, much greater reach, lesser money, greater reach. That is how it worked. 25 years have passed and things have changed so much. And particularly because of the digital medium has come to our help after that. Internet is there and social media is there in a big way. Earlier, the only way that you could express yourself was through the print medium. So last 25 years have been years of tremendous change in terms of creativity, in terms of expression, in terms of reach, nothing like that. So we were fortunate in a way that we came in at that point, that cusp of change, when we could go along with it.
Okay. I was invited to edit Samyukta Fiction by Professor Jayashree, the director of Samyukta Research Center, and I was delighted to join on board. And at that time, I was given a great deal of latitude by Professor Jayashree to put together a web digest of fiction that truly pushed the boundaries of literature.
Samyukta poetry began during the heart of the 2020 COVID-19 lockdown. I have been an on and off poet for a while, in the sense some months I would write poetry, then for some years I wouldn't write any. It was like that. But Dr. G.S. Jayashree of the Samyukta Research Foundation, who's also my teacher, she, I suppose, noticed something, and she said, look, why don't you start a portal for poetry for Samyukta? And this had been an idea that was there at the back of my mind, but being of a slightly lazy disposition, I hadn't picked it up. So now this was kind of being asked as a covert Guru Dakshina. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll begin it. And then, at a very rudimentary level, using just a laptop and a colleague's brother's friend who knew about setting up, websites and blogs, etc. We started Samyukta Poetry on 14th of April 2020.
And that was the only remit that I was looking for. I was looking for writing that challenged literary styles, the short story itself being a genre that Indians have been traditionally very good at, both in English and in the various local languages of the country. So, Samyukta fiction evolved from this idea of using the short story as an index for modern life.
And what we began doing is we began to ask poets to send in their submissions. We began to curate poets and look at their poetry and the kind of work that they're doing, and we would ask them to send in some of their work. And what we did as part of the editorial process was not just to take their poems and splash it on the screen. What we did was that we spent time with it, sat down, lived with their poems, and we would try to find out the essence or the raison d'etre behind these poems, and what the poet is trying to convey.
And especially with the rise of what we call speculative fiction, especially in the novel, right, with science fiction, science fantasy, we wanted to see what the short story looked like around the turn of the century and in the new century.
I've had poets coming back and saying, "Look, we have this book out. Would you like to talk about it?" And I know that it is on account of the fact that they feel heard, and that what we say has a wider audience and reach.
And so I think this space that Samyukta fiction wants to carve for itself is actually writing that changes the genre, changes the stylistic expectations that people have from the short story, even at the same time as it looks at new matter, new content, new themes that befit the new century.
Even today, when I tell somebody that I belong to Samyukta Poetry and I am a part of the Samyukta Research Foundation, the first thing they ask is that the people who own the journal, and I say yes, and they have very fond memories of it because it has held on to the kind of ethics, in publishing, in putting across work, and in acknowledging the people who have contributed. And some very real work has and is taking place through the portals of that journal. So I feel that something that has such a strong foundation can only go on to do more good.
I should say that one of the greatest blessings of being a teacher is that you have generations of students after you, and I'm confident that they will take forward what I've kind of begun. So the future is theirs and they can decide.